Some bands fall apart the moment they lose their singer. Others somehow find someone who takes them even higher. Here are 10 bands that became more successful with a new singer. Number 10. Queen. Freddie Mercury replaced Tim Staffel. Before there was Queen, there was Smile. Guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor put Smile together in 1968, and their original vocalist was a young man named Tim Staffel. The band built a modest following on the London college circuit, landed a deal with Mercury Records, and recorded a handful of songs. But they never broke through. By early 1970, Staffel had grown restless. His interests had drifted towards soul and R&B, and the band was going nowhere fast. He quit and joined a group called Humpy Bong. That departure could have ended everything. Instead, it opened a door.
When she was done, she hung them up.
Staffel's friend from Ealing Art College was a flamboyant, fiercely ambitious young man named Farrokh Bulsara. He had been attending Smile's shows for 2 years, watching from the crowd, absolutely convinced that May and Taylor had something special, and equally convinced that what they were missing was a frontman who could hold an audience in the palm of his hand. When Staffel walked out, Bulsara walked in. He renamed himself Freddie Mercury, suggested calling the new group Queen, and the classic 4-member lineup, Mercury, May, Taylor, and bassist John Deacon, was complete by early 1971. Queen released their debut album in 1973. Queen 2 charted in the UK the following year, and Sheer Heart Attack later in 1974 brought them genuine international attention. By 1975, with A Night at the Opera and the release of Bohemian Rhapsody, a nearly 6-minute song that no radio programmer thought would work, they had become one of the most inventive and successful rock bands on the planet. Their 1985 performance at Live Aid is considered by many to be the greatest live rock set ever recorded. The band went on to sell between 170 and 300 million records worldwide. None of it happens without one friendship at art school and a chance departure by the man who came before. Number 9. The Doobie Brothers. Michael McDonald replaced Tom Johnston. The Doobie Brothers had already carved out a solid career by the mid-1970s. Tom Johnston's guitar-driven, hard-edged California rock had given them radio hits and a road warrior reputation. But in 1975, Johnston collapsed on tour with a bleeding ulcer, so severe that emergency hospitalization was required. The band was already out on the road supporting their album Stampede. They needed someone fast. Guitarist Jeff Baxter knew a session musician and keyboardist who had been doing studio work with Steely Dan. His name was Michael McDonald, a soft-spoken singer from St. Louis, with a remarkably deep, husky voice and an instinct for soulful melody. McDonald stepped in as a temporary touring replacement. Nobody expected him to stay. Within one rehearsal, the rest of the band understood that something had shifted. McDonald's gospel-inflected keyboard style and his voice transformed the band's sound into a blend of blue-eyed soul and smooth rock that nobody had planned for. Johnston eventually left for good in 1977, and McDonald became the primary creative force in the Doobie Brothers. Their 1978 album Minute by Minute hit number 1 on the Billboard 200, staying there for 5 weeks. The single, What a Fool Believes, which McDonald co-wrote with Kenny Loggins, went to number 1 on the Hot 100 and won Grammy Awards for both Record of the Year and Song of the Year at the 1980 ceremony. The album itself won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group. For a band that had always been popular in rock circles, it was a level of mainstream recognition they had never come close to reaching before. A temporary touring hire had quietly become the most important creative voice in the room. Number 8. Iron Maiden. Bruce Dickinson replaced Paul Di'Anno. Iron Maiden's first 2 albums, the self-titled debut and Killers, were raw and punky and genuinely dangerous sounding. Paul Di'Anno was the voice behind them, street level, edgy, and real. Those records helped launch the new wave of British heavy metal and built the band a serious following on both sides of the Atlantic. But Di'Anno's behavior had become increasingly unreliable, and the band's ambitions had grown beyond what the situation could support. By the summer of 1981, band founder and bassist Steve Harris had made his decision. Di'Anno played his final concert with Iron Maiden in Copenhagen on September 10, 1981.
Yesterday's sorrows.
His replacement came from the rival camp of the new wave of British heavy metal. Bruce Dickinson was the singer for a band called Samson, performing under the tongue-in-cheek nickname Bruce Bruce. Harris saw Dickinson at the Reading Festival in 1981 and was struck immediately by the range and power of that voice, a soaring, operatic tenor that seemed built for something much larger than the venues he was playing. Dickinson auditioned at a rehearsal room in Hackney that September and was hired on the spot. Their first collaboration was The Number of the Beast, released in March 1982. It became Iron Maiden's first album to reach number 1 on the UK Albums Chart and was certified platinum in the United States. The first single, Run to the Hills, was the band's first UK Top 10 single. Producer Martin Birch explained it plainly. He hadn't believed Di'Anno was capable of handling some of the more ambitious directions Steve Harris wanted to explore. With Dickinson, the possibilities opened up entirely. The Number of the Beast has sold nearly 20 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling heavy metal albums of all time. A string of platinum albums, Peace of Mind, Power Slave, Somewhere in Time, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, followed in rapid succession throughout the 1980s, establishing Iron Maiden as one of the most important heavy metal bands in history. Number 7. Black Sabbath, Ronnie James Dio replaced Ozzy Osbourne. By April 1979, Black Sabbath had reached a wall. Ozzy Osbourne's behavior had become, in Tony Iommi's words, impossible to work around. 11 months of trying to record a new album had produced almost nothing. Geezer Butler described it simply: Ozzy wasn't interested anymore. The band had carried him through as long as they could. On April 27, 1979, drummer Bill Ward delivered the news. Ozzy was out. He would go on to a successful solo career, but that was still some way off. For now, Black Sabbath needed to find out if they could survive without the voice people associated with every record they had ever made. The man who introduced Iommi to Ronnie James Dio was Sharon Arden, who would later become Sharon Osbourne. Dio had just left Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow and was looking for a new project. He and Iommi met by chance at the Rainbow Bar on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. On their very first day writing together, they finished a song called Children of the Sea. Iommi would later say it was the kind of song that would simply have been beyond them with Ozzy. Dio's vocal range and his whole approach to melody opened up dimensions the band hadn't explored before. Heaven and Hell was released on April 25, 1980. It reached number 9 in the UK and number 28 on the Billboard 200 in the United States, where it was certified platinum, the first Black Sabbath album to earn that certification since Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in 1973. The opening single, Neon Nights, charted in the UK, announcing to anyone paying attention that something genuinely new was happening inside a band many had written off. Iommi would later reflect that the album represented Black Sabbath as people had never heard them before, something that felt right for the time, built around a singer who opened up musical possibilities that hadn't existed before he walked through the door. Dio didn't just save Black Sabbath. He made the case that there was still something vital at the center of the band, even after everything Ozzy had meant to their sound and their identity. The two of them had made one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time. A follow-up, Mob Rules, went platinum in 1981 and kept the momentum going.
So come with me, I know just what to do.
Number 6. Van Halen. Sammy Hagar replaced David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth and Van Halen had been inseparable in the public mind, which is what made his departure in early 1985 feel so final. Roth left amid personal friction that had been building for years, intent on going solo. The prevailing opinion was that Van Halen was effectively finished as a commercial force. Warner Brothers Records quietly suggested the band might want to consider a name change. Eddie Van Halen found the answer through his car mechanic. The same mechanic who worked on Eddie's Lamborghini also worked on the Ferrari belonging to former Montrose frontman Sammy Hagar. Eddie made contact. Hagar came in and the chemistry was immediate. He was also a guitarist, which opened up new possibilities on stage. Van Halen went into the studio in late 1985 and had an album completed by February 1986. 515. Oh, named after Eddie's home studio and a California police code for a mentally disturbed person, was released on March 24, 1986. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, something no Van Halen album had ever managed before. Their previous album, 1984, had peaked at number 2. The single Why Can't This Be Love reached number 3 on the Hot 100, and the album was certified platinum within a week of release. The fastest million-selling record in Warner Brothers history at that point, according to Hagar. Every album the band recorded with Hagar over the next decade went to the same place, OU 812 in 1988, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge in 1991, and Balance in 1995, 4 consecutive number 1 Billboard 200 albums. The band that most people had written off produced the most commercially dominant run in their entire career. Number 5. Journey. Steve Perry replaced Robert Fleischman. Before Steve Perry, there was Robert Fleischman. Journey had spent several years as a jazz fusion instrumental act out of San Francisco, releasing 3 albums that barely registered commercially. Columbia Records made it clear to manager Herbie Herbert the band needed a front man, or they would be dropped. Fleischman was brought in during the summer of 1977 and co-wrote several songs in the early sessions, including what would become Wheel in the Sky. But tensions with Herbert quickly grew, and Fleischman was gone within months. What happened next was unusual. Herbert had picked up a demo tape from a young singer named Steve Perry, who had been fronting an unknown act called the Alien Project. Perry was quietly brought along on the tour, introduced to Fleischman as the Portuguese cousin of roadie John Villanueva. At a soundcheck in Long Beach, Perry sang with the band while Fleischman was elsewhere. That was the end of that. Perry made his public debut with Journey on October 28, 1977, in San Francisco, at an intimate 600-seat venue called the Old Waldorf. Their first album together, Infinity in 1978, produced by Queen's Roy Thomas Baker, reached number 21 on the Billboard 200, 64 chart positions higher than any Journey album before him. The subsequent albums kept climbing. Evolution in 1979, Departure in 1980, and then the landmark Escape in 1981, which went to number 1 and produced Open Arms and Don't Stop Believin'. That latter song, which in 2009 became the top-selling catalog track in iTunes history, among songs not released in the 21st century, has since become one of the most enduring songs in rock radio history. From a struggling fusion band on the verge of being dropped by their label, Journey became one of the biggest arena rock acts in the world. The manager who had hidden Perry from Robert Fleischman had, in hindsight, made the most consequential decision in the band's history. Number 4. Genesis. Phil Collins replaced Peter Gabriel. August 15, 1975. That was the day Genesis announced that Peter Gabriel had left the band. For fans of their elaborate, theatrical progressive rock, the costumes, the surreal storytelling, the genuine strangeness, it felt like the end. Gabriel had been the face and voice of everything Genesis stood for. The music press assumed the band would quietly disappear. They didn't fold. They turned, reluctantly, to the man behind the drum kit. Phil Collins had first suggested Genesis simply become an instrumental group. When that was rejected, he proposed they find a proper replacement and teach whoever it was the parts. They auditioned singers for weeks and found no one right. Eventually, Collins started demonstrating how the vocal lines should sound. The band heard what they'd been looking for all along. Collins officially took over as lead vocalist while continuing to play drums in the studio. The transition took time. Their first post-Gabriel album, A Trick of the Tail in 1976, was well received and reached the top 3 in the UK, reassuring everyone that the band hadn't collapsed without its famous frontman. As the decade turned, Genesis leaned steadily further toward polished, radio-friendly rock. Duke in 1980 went to number 1 in the UK, their first chart topper. So did Abacab in 1981. By the mid-1980s, they had become one of the biggest acts in the world. Invisible Touch in 1986 hit number 1 in the UK and produced the title track, which reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, Genesis's first and only American chart topper. In a strange footnote of rock history, Peter Gabriel's solo single Sledgehammer knocked Invisible Touch off the top spot the very next week. Invisible Touch sold more than 6 million copies in the United States alone and went to number 1 in the UK. The band that critics had written off when Gabriel left had become, under Collins, one of the defining pop rock bands of the decade. Number 3. Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham replaced Bob Welch. By the end of 1974, Fleetwood Mac was a band in genuine trouble. The founding blues era, the years of Peter Green, had ended long before. Various members had cycled in and out. Guitarist Bob Welch, who had kept the group alive through the early part of the decade, had reached the end of his time with them and left to go solo. Mick Fleetwood was searching for a recording studio in Los Angeles when a studio engineer played him a track from a duo he had recently produced. A pair of young Californian musicians named Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. Fleetwood wanted Buckingham as his guitarist. Buckingham agreed to join on one condition: that his musical partner, Stevie Nicks, come with him. On New Year's Eve 1974, both of them joined Fleetwood Mac. The first album from this lineup, the self-titled Fleetwood Mac in 1975, eventually climbed to number 1 on the Billboard 200 and produced 3 top 20 singles, including Rhiannon and Say You Love Me. But that was only the opening act. Rumors in 1977 was recorded under extraordinary personal pressure. Virtually every member of the band was going through a painful breakup simultaneously. That emotional turbulence ended up on tape in ways nobody planned. The album spent 31 weeks at number 1 in the United States, won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, and has since sold over 40 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums in recorded history. A band that had been quietly struggling through the early 1970s without a fixed identity or a consistent lineup had been completely transformed. Mick Fleetwood had gone looking for a recording studio and walked out with the 2 people who would change everything. Number 2. AC/DC. Brian Johnson replaced Bon Scott. On February 19, 1980, Bon Scott was found dead in a car parked outside a friend's house in South London. He was 33. The official cause was acute alcohol poisoning. Scott had been the voice of AC/DC since 1974. Lewd, charismatic, streetwise, and irreplaceable in the eyes of the people who loved him. In the days after his death, the band briefly considered calling it quits. Bon Scott's own family encouraged them to carry on. The man they found was Brian Johnson, former singer of Geordie, a band from Newcastle who had a brief run of UK chart success in the early 1970s before breaking up. By 1980, Johnson was in his early 30s, running a small car repair business, living at his parents' house in Gateshead, and essentially done with music. The phone call came in March 1980. He drove to London to audition. Johnson was officially announced as AC/DC's new singer on April 1, 1980. Just weeks later, he flew to Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas to begin recording with producer Mutt Lange. The album came together quickly. Johnson wrote his lyrics almost entirely in the studio. Back in Black was released on July 25, 1980, dedicated to Bon Scott's memory, with an all-black cover and no band name on the sleeve. Within 2 weeks, it topped the UK albums chart. In the US, it spent 131 weeks on the Billboard 200, peaking at number 4. Back in Black has since sold over 50 million copies worldwide and is the second best-selling album in recorded history, behind only Michael Jackson's Thriller. AC/DC had built a loyal and devoted following with Bon Scott across 6 albums. With Brian Johnson recording their 7th, they made the best-selling rock album of all time, in 6 weeks, in a studio in the Bahamas, from a man who had been fixing cars in Gateshead just months before. Number 1. Judas Priest. Rob Halford replaced Al Atkins. Judas Priest was formed in Birmingham in 1969, and their original vocalist was a man named Al Atkins. He helped write the earliest songs and gave the band their name. But by 1973, with no record deal in sight and money running thin, Atkins made the difficult decision to leave. He had a family to support. He stepped aside. The vocalist who replaced him was Rob Halford, a young singer with an extraordinary vocal range, capable of moving from a deep, commanding lower register all the way up to piercing high notes that no one in heavy metal had quite attempted before. Halford had been fronting a band called Hiroshima. He brought not only his voice, but a physical presence, the leather jacket, the motorcycle, the commanding stage authority, that would define what a heavy metal frontman could be for generations to come. With Halford at the microphone, Judas Priest signed with Gull Records and released their debut album Rock-a-Rolla in 1974. The real momentum came with Sad Wings of Destiny in 1976, which is still considered a landmark of the genre. Their move to CBS Records and the release of Sin After Sin in 1977 extended their reach internationally. Then came British Steel in 1980, which reached number 4 on the UK albums chart and went platinum in the United States. Screaming for Vengeance in 1982 reached number 17 on the Billboard 200, their highest US chart position to that point. Defenders of the Faith in 1984 followed it to platinum. By the mid-1980s, Judas Priest were filling arenas across North America and had codified the leather and studs visual identity that heavy metal still carries today. Al Atkins wrote the songs and gave the band its name and its earliest sense of direction. Rob Halford gave Judas Priest their voice, their power, and their place in history. Those are 10 bands that became more successful with a new singer. Whether it was a planned transition or a sudden crisis that forced a change, each of these bands found someone who didn't just fill a vacancy, they opened a door the band didn't even know was there. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.